The blizzard had started 3 hours ago, and Felicity Norton could no longer feel her fingers wrapped around the single carpet bag that contained everything she owned in this world. She stood on the platform of the tiny train station in Westcliff, Colorado, her thin traveling dress doing nothing to protect her from the savage wind that tore across the mountain valley. The train that had brought her from Philadelphia had already disappeared into the white fury, and the station master had locked up and hurried home before she could even ask where to find Harrison Owens, the rancher who had sent for her. The letter in her pocket, now dampened by melting snow, promised a new life, a fresh start, and most importantly, safety from the debts and dangers she had left behind. She had expected someone to meet her at the station. The letter had been quite specific about the date and time of her arrival, January 15th, 1883, on the afternoon train. But the platform was empty except for the driving snow and the howling wind that seemed determined to push her back onto the tracks. Felicity pressed herself against the station wall, trying to find some shelter from the wind, but the cold seeped through her clothing and into her bones. She had sold nearly everything to afford the train ticket west, gambling her entire future on the word of a man she had never met, a cattle rancher who needed a wife and was willing to pay her passage in exchange for her agreement to marry him upon arrival. The advertisement had seemed like providence when she had found it in the Philadelphia newspaper. A respectable rancher in Colorado Territory seeking a woman of good character to become his wife. He offered security, a home, and the promise of protection. After her father had died leaving nothing but gambling debts, and the men he owed money to had started coming around with threats and leering eyes, Felicity had few options. Her aunt had suggested she find work in one of the factories, but Felicity had heard the stories of those places, of the conditions that ground women down until they were old before their time. Marriage to a stranger in the West seemed less frightening than the certain misery that awaited her in the city. Now, standing alone in a blizzard with darkness beginning to fall, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The cold was becoming unbearable. Her feet had gone numb inside her thin boots, and her teeth chattered so violently she had bitten her tongue. She tried the station door, but it was locked tight. The windows were shuttered. There was no shelter here. She looked down the empty street, barely visible through the snow. A few buildings huddled against the mountain slope, their windows glowing with warm lamplight, but they seemed impossibly far away. Felicity forced herself to move, to step off the platform and into the deep snow that had already accumulated on the dirt road. Each step was agony. The wind pushed her sideways and she stumbled, nearly falling. She caught herself and pressed forward, aiming for the nearest building with light in its windows. Her breath came in short gasps that hurt her chest. Ice formed on her eyelashes. The carpet bag became impossibly heavy, and she considered dropping it, but it held the few precious things she had left of her mother, things she could not bear to lose. The distance to the building grew longer instead of shorter. The snow came down so thick she could barely see. Her legs stopped obeying her commands. She fell to her knees in a drift, and the cold snow soaked through her dress. She tried to stand, but her body would not cooperate. The wind screamed around her, and she realized with a strange detachment that she might actually die here, frozen on a street in a town she had never seen before, waiting for a man who apparently had forgotten she was coming. She thought of her mother, who had died when Felicity was 16, and wondered if this was how it would end for the Norton family. Her father had drunk himself to death over 5 years, and now she would freeze to death in Colorado. It seemed impossibly unfair. She had been so hopeful on the train, imagining her new life, picturing the ranch and the mountains and the fresh start. She had even dared to hope that Harrison Owens might be kind, that they might build something real together despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting. The cold was making her sleepy. She knew that was dangerous, that she needed to stay awake, but it was so hard. She closed her eyes for just a moment, and the wind did not seem quite so loud anymore. The cold became almost bearable. She thought she heard hoofbeats, but that seemed unlikely. No one would be riding in this weather. The sound grew louder, more insistent. She felt hands on her shoulders lifting her. A voice spoke, but she could not make out the words over the wind. Someone picked her up, and she was too weak to protest. She felt herself being lifted onto a horse, felt strong arms around her, and a warm body pressed against her back. The horse began to move, and she drifted in and out of consciousness. Time became meaningless. She was only aware of the cold and the motion and the arms that held her secure in the saddle. When awareness returned more fully, she was lying on something soft. Warmth surrounded her, blessed heat that made her skin prickle painfully. She tried to open her eyes, but they would not cooperate. She heard voices, a man and a woman, speaking in urgent tones. Hands removed her wet clothing, and she should have been embarrassed, but she was too cold and too exhausted to care. Blankets piled on top of her, heavy and warm. Something hot touched her lips, and she swallowed reflexively. Warm liquid, sweet with honey, flowed down her throat. Time passed. She slept and woke and slept again. The pain in her hands and feet grew worse before it grew better. She heard the man's voice again, closer now, speaking to her even though she could not respond. He told her she was going to be fine, that she just needed to rest, that she was safe now. The voice was deep and warm with a slight rasp that made it distinctive. She wanted to thank him, to ask who he was and where she was, but words would not come. When she finally opened her eyes, pale sunlight was streaming through a window. She was in a small bedroom with rough log walls and simple furniture. A patchwork quilt covered her, and she was wearing a flannel nightgown that was far too large for her. Her hands and feet throbbed, but she could wiggle her fingers and toes, which seemed like a miracle. She turned her head and saw a man sitting in a chair beside the bed. He was tall and lean with dark brown hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of beard on his strong jaw. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, and they watched her with a mixture of concern and relief. "Welcome back," he said, and she recognized the voice from her fevered memories. "You gave us quite a scare. Where am I?" Her voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "My ranch about 3 miles outside Westcliff. I am Harrison Owens." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I am guessing you are Felicity Norton, the woman I was supposed to meet at the train station yesterday afternoon." "Yesterday." She struggled to sit up, but he raised a hand to stop her. "Do not push yourself. You were half frozen when I found you. The doctor says you will be fine, but you need to rest." Tears stung her eyes, surprising her. "I thought you had forgotten me. I thought I was going to die." His face darkened with regret and anger, though she sensed the anger was not directed at her. "I would never forget. I was on my way to town when one of my fence lines broke in the blizzard. 50 head of cattle got out, and I had to round them up before they wandered off into the canyon. By the time I got them secured and rode into town, it was full dark and the storm was at its worst. I found you collapsed in the street. Another 10 minutes and—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I am sorry. You almost died because I was late. You saved my life." She looked at him more carefully, noting the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the worried crease between his brows. "You rode through a blizzard to find me. Of course I did. You are my intended, my responsibility." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. though I would understand if you wanted to head back east on the next train. This was a terrible introduction to life in Colorado. Felicity pushed herself up on her elbows, ignoring the protest from her sore muscles. I have nowhere to go back to, Mr. Owens. And I did not come all this way to give up because of one blizzard. He turned to look at her, surprise evident on his face. You are tougher than you look. I survived my father's drinking and his debts and the men who came to collect. I survived the journey west alone. I will survive Colorado winters too. She met his gaze steadily, wanting him to understand that she was not a fragile thing that would break at the first hardship. Something shifted in his expression, a spark of respect or maybe approval. The doctor says you need at least 3 days of bed rest before you are up and around. Martha, my housekeeper, will look after you. She is the one who got you out of your wet clothes and into something warm. I hope that is acceptable. Please thank her for me. And thank you, Mr. Owens, for saving my life. Harrison, he said. If we are going to be married, you should call me Harrison. Felicity, she replied, or just Felicity works fine. He nodded, and for a moment they just looked at each other, two strangers bound together by letters and desperation, and now by the shared experience of a near tragedy. He was not what she had expected. The advertisement had made him sound older, more settled, but he could not be much past 30. He had the weathered look of a man who spent his days outdoors, the strong hands of someone who worked with cattle and horses, but there was something gentle in his eyes that made her think he might be kind after all. I will let you rest, Harrison said, moving toward the door. Martha will bring you some food. If you need anything, just call out. I will be working around the ranch, but I am never far. After he left, Felicity lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. She was alive. She was safe. She was in the home of the man who was supposed to become her husband. Nothing had gone according to plan, but she was here, and that was what mattered. She closed her eyes and let sleep claim her again, this time without the fear and cold that had accompanied her earlier rest. The next 3 days passed in a blur of sleep and healing. Martha turned out to be a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She brought Felicity meals of hearty soup and fresh bread, made sure she drank plenty of water, and checked on her hands and feet multiple times each day to ensure there was no lasting damage from the cold. She spoke with a slight German accent and had a no-nonsense manner that Felicity found comforting. Harrison came to check on her twice a day, morning and evening. Their conversations were brief and somewhat awkward at first. He would ask how she was feeling, if she needed anything, and she would assure him she was recovering nicely. But gradually, they began to talk about other things. He told her about the ranch, about the 200 head of cattle he ran, about the challenges of ranching in the high country. She told him about Philadelphia, about her mother's love of books, about the small garden she had tended in their tiny yard. On the 4th day, Martha declared her fit enough to get up and move around. Felicity dressed in one of the simple dresses Martha had altered to fit her, grateful to be out of the nightgown. She made her way slowly through the ranch house, taking in her new home. It was larger than she had expected, with a spacious main room that served as kitchen and sitting area, 3 bedrooms, and even a small study. Everything was well built and solid, if somewhat plain. The furniture was handmade but of good quality. Windows faced east and south, letting in plenty of light. She found Harrison in the barn, working on a saddle. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "Should you be out of bed?" "Martha says I am healed enough. I cannot stay in bed forever." She stepped closer, watching him work. His hands moved with practiced ease, the leather responding to his touch. "I wanted to thank you properly. You saved my life, Harrison. I owe you everything." He set down his tools and stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "You do not owe me anything, Felicity. I am just glad I got to town when I did." He hesitated, then added, "I have been thinking about our arrangement, about the marriage." Her heart sank. He was going to tell her he had changed his mind, that she should leave. "Yes, you agreed to marry me based on letters. You had never met me. You had no idea what you were really getting into. I think, after what happened, you deserve a choice." He met her eyes. "Stay here, get your strength back, and take some time to decide if this is really what you want. If you want to marry me, we will do it. If you want to go somewhere else, I will pay your passage and give you enough money to get started somewhere new. No obligations." Felicity stared at him, trying to understand. "Why would you do that?" "Because you almost died before we even met. Because you deserve to have a choice about your future. Because a marriage should be something both people want, not just a business arrangement born of desperation." He looked uncomfortable, as if he was not used to speaking his feelings aloud. "I want a wife, yes, someone to share this life with. But I want her to want to be here too." Something warm bloomed in her chest, a feeling she could not quite name. He was giving her a choice when he had no obligation to do so. He was putting her needs before his own. She thought of the men she had known in Philadelphia, the ones who had seen her as nothing more than payment for her father's debts. Harrison Owens was nothing like them. "I do not need time to decide," she said firmly. "I came here to start a new life, to marry you and build something together. Nothing has changed except that I know now what kind of man you are. You are honorable and kind. You saved my life. I would be proud to be your wife, Harrison." His eyes searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation. "You are sure?" "I am sure." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features and making him suddenly, strikingly handsome. "Then we should get married. How about next week? That will give you time to fully recover and give me time to arrange everything. There is a preacher in town who can perform the ceremony." "Next week sounds perfect." They stood there in the barn, sunlight streaming through the gaps in the walls, dust motes dancing in the air between them. It was not romantic in the conventional sense, but Felicity felt something shift between them, some understanding taking root. This would be a real marriage, she realized, not just a business arrangement. They would build a life together, here on this ranch in the shadow of the mountains. The week passed quickly. Felicity helped Martha around the house, learning the rhythms of ranch life. She discovered she had a talent for baking, much to Martha's delight, and she spent hours in the kitchen learning to make bread and pies. Harrison took her on a tour of the ranch, showing her the cattle and the horses, explaining his plans for expanding the herd. She loved the wide open spaces, the clean mountain air, the way the snow glittered on the peaks in the distance. They talked more easily now, the awkwardness fading as they learned about each other. Harrison told her about growing up in Wyoming, about learning to ranch from his father before heading to Colorado to start his own operation 5 years ago. She told him about her mother's death, about the long, slow decline of her father, about the fear she had lived with in those final months in Philadelphia. He listened without judgment, and when she finished, he took her hand and promised that she would never have to be afraid again. On a cold Saturday in late January, they were married in the small church in Westcliff. Martha and her husband Carl stood as witnesses, along with a few of Harrison's friends from neighboring ranches. Felicity wore a simple blue dress that Martha had helped her make, and Harrison wore his best suit, which he clearly did not wear often based on how he tugged at the collar. The preacher, Reverend Thomas, spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of partnership in building a life together. When Harrison said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. When Felicity said hers, she meant every word. They were building something real here, something that had started with desperation and letters but was becoming more with each passing day. When Harrison kissed her at the end of the ceremony, it was gentle and sweet, a promise of things to come. They held a small gathering at the ranch afterward. Martha had prepared a feast, and several neighboring families came to celebrate. Felicity met ranchers and their wives, shopkeepers from town, even the doctor who had checked on her after her near freezing. Everyone was welcoming, curious about the mail-order bride who had nearly died before meeting her groom. She told the story several times, and each time Harrison would look uncomfortable, still bothered by the fact that he had been late to meet her. As the sun set and the guests departed, Felicity found herself alone with her new husband for the first time as a married couple. They stood on the porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. The temperature was dropping quickly and she shivered despite her shawl. Cold? Harrison asked. A little. He put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Cannot have you freezing again. I would never forgive myself. She laughed and leaned into his warmth. I think I am safe now. They stood there for a long moment, and then Harrison said quietly, I know this is not a conventional marriage. I know we barely know each other, but I want you to know that I am going to do everything in my power to make you happy, Felicity, to give you a good life here. She turned to look up at him, seeing the earnestness in his eyes. I know, and I am going to do the same for you. He smiled and bent to kiss her again, less tentative this time. When he pulled back, he said, Dreams begin here, Felicity, our dreams, together. The words settled over her like a benediction. Dreams begin here. She had come to Colorado with nothing but hope and desperation, and she had found safety and kindness, and the beginning of something that might become love. She smiled and took his hand, and together they went inside their home to begin their life together. The first months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Felicity learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and hard work, the satisfaction of seeing cattle thriving and fences mended. She took over the household responsibilities from Martha, who still came 3 times a week to help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. She learned to cook meals for hungry ranch hands, to preserve food for the long winters, to manage the household accounts. Harrison was a patient teacher, never condescending or impatient when she made mistakes. He showed her how to read the weather, how to spot when a cow was about to give birth, how to ride the gentler horses in his string. She proved to be a quick learner, and she could see his pride when she mastered a new skill. Their relationship deepened gradually. They talked long into the evenings, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Harrison told her about his dream of building the ranch into something substantial, something he could pass down to children someday. Felicity told him about her love of books and learning, how she had always wanted to travel and see new places. They laughed together over small things, inside jokes that developed between them. They argued occasionally, usually about practical matters, but they learned to talk through their disagreements instead of letting resentment fester. The physical side of their marriage developed more slowly. Harrison was considerate and gentle, always making sure she was comfortable and willing. The first time they made love, he took his time, whispering reassurances and moving slowly until she relaxed into the experience. It was not earth-shattering, but it was tender and intimate, and afterward he held her close and told her she was beautiful. With time and practice, they learned each other's bodies as they had learned each other's minds, and the physical connection between them grew stronger. Spring came late to the high country, but when it arrived, it transformed the landscape. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows. The cattle grew fat on new grass. Calves were born, wobbly-legged and curious. Felicity spent hours outdoors, helping with the calving, tending the garden she had planted, riding the mare Harrison had given her as a wedding gift. One evening in May, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink, Harrison took her hand. "Are you happy here, Felicity?" "Truly," she looked at him. This man who had saved her life and given her a home and treated her with unfailing kindness and respect. "I am happier than I ever thought possible. This life, this place, it is everything I dreamed of and more." "I love you," he said, the words coming out in a rush as if he had been holding them back for weeks. "I know we started this as a practical arrangement, but somewhere along the way I fell completely in love with you. You are smart and strong and beautiful, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears blurred her vision. "I love you too, Harrison. I think I started falling for you that first day when you sat by my bed looking so worried and guilty. You have given me everything. A home, safety, purpose, and now love. I am the luckiest woman in Colorado." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, and she kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and joy that filled her heart. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Dreams begin here," he whispered, echoing the words he had spoken on their wedding night. "And this is just the beginning, my love." Summer brought its own challenges and joys. The heat was intense at the high altitude, but the evenings were cool and pleasant. Harrison hired 2 additional ranch hands to help with the increased workload, young men named Sam and Billy, who were hardworking and respectful. Felicity learned to cook for a crew, preparing huge meals that the men demolished in minutes. She also began teaching. Several families in the area had children who needed education, but the nearest school was in town, too far for daily travel. Felicity started holding lessons in her home 3 days a week, teaching reading and arithmetic and history to a group of 8 children ranging in age from 6 to 14. She loved the work, loved seeing the children's faces light up when they mastered a new concept. Harrison was supportive of her teaching, proud of the way she was contributing to the community. He built her a bookshelf for the small collection of books she was accumulating, bought her supplies when he went to town, and never complained when the house was full of children's voices. In August, Felicity realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another week to be sure, then told Martha her suspicion. Martha smiled broadly and arranged for the doctor to come out to the ranch. Dr. Stevens confirmed what Felicity already knew in her heart. She was going to have a baby, due sometime in March. She told Harrison that evening after supper. They were sitting in the study where he was working on the ranch accounts. She perched on the edge of his desk, her heart pounding with nervousness and excitement. "Harrison, I have something to tell you." He looked up from his ledger, immediately attentive to the serious tone in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine. Better than fine. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, and then a grin split his face. He stood up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over, and he swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "A baby. We are going to have a baby," she laughed, holding onto his shoulders. "Yes, a baby. Due in March, the doctor says." He set her down carefully as if she might break. "This is wonderful. This is the best news. How are you feeling? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working so hard?" "I am fine, Harrison. Women have babies all the time. I am not going to break." But he fussed over her anyway, insisting she rest more, do less heavy work. She indulged him because she found his concern endearing, even when it was excessive. He told everyone they met about the baby, unable to contain his excitement. The neighboring wives began stopping by with advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Martha immediately began knitting blankets and tiny sweaters. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. Felicity experienced some morning sickness in the early months, but it passed quickly. Her belly grew, and she had to alter her dresses to accommodate the changes in her body. Harrison was constantly amazed by the transformation, placing his hands on her stomach to feel the baby kick, talking to the child as if it could already understand him. Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in October. Felicity remembered with vivid clarity the blizzard that had nearly killed her less than a year ago. She told Harrison about her fear of the winter, of something going wrong when the baby came. He held her close and promised that everything would be fine, that he would make sure the doctor was available when her time came, that she would not be alone. Christmas was a joyous occasion. They invited Martha and Carl, along with several neighboring families, for dinner. The house was full of laughter and warmth, the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread. Felicity felt overwhelmingly grateful for this life she had built, for the community that had welcomed her, for the man who loved her and the child they would soon meet. In February, as her due date approached, Harrison became increasingly nervous. He checked on her constantly, barely wanted to leave the house for ranch work. Felicity found it both sweet and slightly exasperating. She felt huge and uncomfortable, eager for the pregnancy to be over, but also nervous about the ordeal of childbirth. Her labor began on a cold morning in early March. The pains started gradually, and she labored for hours with Martha and the doctor in attendance. Harrison paced in the main room, driven nearly mad by the sounds of his wife's pain. When the baby finally arrived after nearly 12 hours of labor, it was a boy, healthy and loud. The doctor brought the baby out to Harrison, who stared at his son with wonder and fear. "He is perfect, doctor," Stephen said, "and your wife did beautifully. She is tired but fine. You can go see her in a minute." When Harrison entered the bedroom, he found Felicity propped up on pillows, exhausted but smiling, the baby in her arms. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "Meet your son," she said softly. Harrison sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face, the miniature fingers curled into fists. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." "What should we name him?" Felicity asked. They had discussed names for months but had never settled on anything definite. Harrison looked at his son, thinking about the future, about the legacy he wanted to build. "Henry," he said. "Henry James Owens, after my father and yours." Tears filled Felicity's eyes. Her father had not been a good man in many ways, but he had loved her once, before the drinking took over his life. "Henry, I love it." The weeks after Henry's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. The baby was demanding, crying frequently and sleeping poorly. Felicity was overwhelmed by the responsibility, by the constant needs of this tiny human who depended on her for everything. But Harrison was an involved father, taking the baby whenever he could, changing diapers and walking the floor with a crying infant so Felicity could rest. Martha was invaluable, taking over the household chores so Felicity could focus on recovering and caring for Henry. The neighboring women stopped by with meals and advice. Sam and Billy, the ranch hands, took on extra responsibilities so Harrison could spend more time with his family. As spring arrived and Henry grew, life settled into a new rhythm. Felicity resumed teaching, though with a shorter schedule to accommodate the baby. Harrison continued building the ranch, adding to the herd, improving the facilities. They were building something lasting, something meaningful. One evening in late spring, as they sat on the porch with Henry sleeping in Felicity's arms, Harrison said, "Do you remember what I told you on our wedding night? That dreams begin here, I remember." "I was right. Look at what we have built in just over a year. A home, a family, a future. This is everything I dreamed of." He looked at her with such love that it took her breath away. "You made all of this possible, Felicity. You took a chance on a stranger in a strange land, and you built this life with me." "We built it together," she corrected gently. "And we are going to keep building it. This is just the beginning." He smiled and kissed her softly, careful not to wake the baby. "Just the beginning," he agreed. The years passed, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Henry grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's quick mind. When he was 3, Felicity became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Rose, who turned the household upside down with their demands and their laughter. The ranch prospered under Harrison's careful management. He expanded the cattle operation, added horses, built new outbuildings, and improved the existing structures. He developed a reputation as a fair man who treated his workers well and his animals better. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he became a respected voice in the Regional Cattlemen's Association. Felicity's school grew as well. More families moved into the area, and soon she was teaching 15 children. Harrison built her a separate schoolhouse on the ranch property, a one-room building with desks and a blackboard and shelves for books. She taught 5 days a week during the school term, and she loved watching her students learn and grow. Their marriage deepened with each passing year. They knew each other completely, could read each other's moods and thoughts with a glance. They still talked long into the evenings, discussing the ranch, the children, the future. They still laughed together over small things. They still reached for each other in the night, the physical passion between them undiminished by time and familiarity. There were hard times, too. A drought in the summer of 1886 tested the ranch's resources and Harrison's ingenuity. One of the ranch hands was injured in a fall from a horse and had to be sent back east to recover. Felicity had a miscarriage in 1887, a loss that devastated them both but ultimately brought them even closer together. But through it all, they had each other. They had built something real and lasting, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep love. The scared young woman who had nearly frozen to death on a train platform was gone, replaced by a confident wife and mother and teacher who knew her own strength. The lonely rancher who had advertised for a bride had become a husband and father who cherished his family above all else. On a cold January evening in 1888, exactly 5 years after Felicity had arrived in Westcliff, they sat together in front of the fireplace. The children were asleep upstairs. Martha and Carl had gone home. The ranch was quiet except for the crackling of the fire and the wind whistling outside. 5 years, Harrison said, his arm around Felicity's shoulders. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean. She snuggled closer to his warmth. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life, that I have all of this. You ever think about what would have happened if I had not found you that night, if I had been just a few minutes later? She shivered despite the fire's warmth. Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it. You did find me. You saved me, and then you gave me everything. We gave each other everything, he corrected, echoing her words from years before. He tilted her face up to his. I love you, Felicity Owens, more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I love you too, Harrison. Always. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, snow began to fall, but inside they were warm and safe and together. The dreams that had begun on that snowy night 5 years ago had grown and flourished beyond anything either of them had imagined possible. More years passed, each one adding to their story. Henry grew tall and strong, learning to work the ranch alongside his father. The twins became young ladies, pretty and smart and full of life. In 1890, Felicity gave birth to another son, Thomas, who completed their family. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. In 1895, when Felicity was 33 and Harrison was 38, they celebrated 12 years of marriage. Their children were growing up quickly. Henry was 14, already talking about taking over the ranch someday. The twins were 9, helping their mother in the school and the house. Thomas was 5, following his father everywhere and asking endless questions about cattle and horses. That anniversary evening, after the children were in bed, Harrison gave Felicity a gift. It was a locket on a delicate gold chain, and inside were tiny photographs of their 4 children. "It is beautiful," she breathed, tears filling her eyes. "I will treasure it always. I wanted you to have something that showed what we have built together, our family, our legacy." He fastened the chain around her neck. "You are worth every moment of worry, every sleepless night, every challenge we have faced. You are worth everything, Felicity." She turned to face him, framing his face with her hands. "You gave me a life worth living. You gave me purpose and love and a family. You made my dreams come true, Harrison." "Dreams begin here," he whispered, pulling her close. "And they keep growing, keep getting better every single day." They kissed, and it was as sweet and full of promise as their first kiss on their wedding day, even after 12 years of marriage and 4 children and countless shared experiences. Their love had not dimmed with time. If anything, it had grown stronger, deeper, more resilient. The turn of the century brought changes to Colorado and to their lives. The wild days of the Old West were fading into memory. Towns grew into cities. Railroads expanded. Technology advanced. But the ranch remained a constant, a piece of the old life preserved in the new century. Henry took over more responsibility for the ranch as Harrison began to slow down, though he was only in his mid-40s. The years of hard work had taken their toll, and Harrison was content to let his son take the lead while he provided guidance and wisdom. The twins went away to school in Denver, receiving the education Felicity had always dreamed of for her daughters. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with horses and spent hours in the barn with the animals. Felicity continued teaching, though her students now included children and grandchildren of her earliest pupils. She had become a fixture in the community, respected and loved for her dedication to education and her kindness to everyone she met. Women still came to her for advice, for help, for a sympathetic ear. In 1902, Henry married a local girl named Sarah, and the following year they gave Harrison and Felicity their first grandchild, a girl named Grace. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Felicity was overcome with emotion. She thought about the scared young woman who had stepped off that train in the blizzard 19 years ago, and she marveled at the life she had built, at the family that now surrounded her. "What are you thinking?" Harrison asked softly. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, Grace sleeping peacefully in Felicity's arms. "I am thinking about how far we have come, about how lucky I am." She looked at him, this man who had been her savior and her partner and her love for nearly 2 decades. His hair was more gray than brown now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes still held the same warmth and kindness that had captured her heart all those years ago. "I am the lucky one," he said. "I placed an advertisement in a newspaper, hoping for a practical arrangement, and I got you. I got love and partnership, and a family and a life beyond my wildest dreams. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Felicity." "We were the best thing that happened to each other," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We saved each other that night in the blizzard. You saved my body, and I saved your heart, and together we built something beautiful." He reached over and took her hand, the gesture as natural and comfortable as breathing after so many years together. "Dreams begin here," he said, as he had said countless times over the years. "And they never end. They just keep growing generation after generation." Felicity looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms, then out at the ranch that stretched before them, then at the man beside her. "Dreams begin here," she agreed. "And this dream, our dream, will last forever." The years continued to unfold, bringing more grandchildren, more changes, more growth. The twins married and started families of their own. Thomas took over the horse breeding operation, expanding it into a successful business. Harrison and Felicity grew older together, their love never fading, only deepening with each passing season. In 1910, on a warm summer evening, they celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. The house was full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter echoing through the rooms. After everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Harrison and Felicity walked out to the porch, as they had done thousands of times before. 27 years, Felicity said, leaning against the porch rail. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like yesterday that I stepped off that train into the blizzard." Harrison came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Best decision I ever made, placing that advertisement. Best day of my life, finding you in that snow. Best decision I ever made, answering your letter, coming to Colorado, taking a chance on a stranger." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Harrison Owens. I have loved you for 27 years, and I will love you for the rest of my life. I love you too, Felicity, more than words can express." He kissed her gently. "You know what I always say. Dreams begin here," they said together. And then they laughed, the sound mixing with the evening birdsong and the distant lowing of cattle. They stood together on the porch as darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Colorado sky. Behind them was the house they had built together, filled with the evidence of their life and love. Before them stretched the ranch, the land they had worked and nurtured for nearly 3 decades. Around them was the family they had created, the legacy they would leave behind. The scared mail-order bride who had nearly frozen to death waiting for her dreams to begin had found something better than she had ever imagined. She had found love and partnership and purpose. She had found home. And the lonely rancher who had advertised for a practical arrangement had found the other half of his soul. He had found joy and family, and a love that sustained him through every challenge. Together, they had taken desperation and turned it into destiny. They had taken a business arrangement and turned it into a love story. They had taken a freezing night in a blizzard and turned it into the beginning of a beautiful life. Dreams had begun here, on this ranch in the shadow of the Colorado mountains, on a snowy night when a cowboy had saved a young woman's life and told her that her dreams could start. And those dreams had grown and flourished for nearly 3 decades, producing a family and a legacy that would endure for generations to come. As they stood together in the gathering darkness, Harrison pulled Felicity closer and whispered the words that had become their personal mantra, their shared promise, their eternal truth. "Dreams begin here, my love, and they last forever." Felicity smiled and kissed her husband, and knew in her heart that he was absolutely right. Their dreams had begun on that cold January night in 1883, and they would continue long after they were gone, carried on by their children and their children's children, an eternal testament to the power of love and faith, and taking chances on strangers who become soulmates. The story of the mail-order bride who froze waiting for a dream and the cowboy who arrived and made those dreams come true had reached its happiest possible ending. And it was an ending that was also a beginning, a promise that love and family and faith could overcome any obstacle, survive any hardship, and create something beautiful that would last through all the generations to come.